Russia is trying to justify its actions by accusing the Ukrainian authorities of oppressing Russian speakers and by accusing NATO of a Cold War mentality. This is nothing but propaganda, designed to subvert the Ukrainian government, pervert the truth, and divert attention from Russia's own illegal and illegitimate actions. As I speak, some 40,000 Russian troops are massed along Ukraine's borders. Not training, but ready for combat. We have seen the satellite images day after day.
Russian military strength along the border with Ukraine was on full display Friday. Soldiers sat and waited while Ukrainian border guards crossed the frontier to inspect the huge Russian aid convoy that has caused Kiev so much alarm. Kiev has insisted on inspecting the trucks before they move across the border toward eastern Ukraine. Authorities say they suspect the aid convoy is a cover for Russian military intervention, something Moscow denies. The head of the Red Cross mission in Ukraine says each truck is staffed by a driver and at least one passenger. Ukraine authorities say that only one driver, accompanied by a Red Cross delegate, will be allowed to cross. Some 280 trucks are now waiting to enter Ukraine to deliver aid to besieged pro-Russian rebels.
On a diplomatic collision course this morning over Ukraine, sanctions against Moscow, including visa bans and asset freezes, are expected today.
Crimea's parliament declared independence this morning, asking to join Russia after Sunday's referendum. 97% of Crimean voters want to break away, but Ukraine is ready to call up 40,000 troops. Charlie Dagida is in eastern Ukraine, where the army is mobilizing.
We're right along the Ukrainian border with Ukraine on this side and Russia on the other. Ukrainian soldiers told us they got the order 4 days ago to start digging these deep trenches. They can't tell us how far back they go and how far they extend, but they've seen Russia's military incursion extend beyond Crimea, and that's obviously causing concern. They've also seen pro-Russian demonstrations in Donetsk, where people have overrun government buildings there. Now, the Russians will tell you that's all the evidence they need, in their words, that the Ukrainian officials have lost control of eastern Ukraine. There is an ongoing threat that the Russian military has the authority to launch military action in order to protect ethnic Russians who may be under threat. It's the same kind of language and the pretext used to invade Crimea, and that is the obvious concern here. For CBS This Morning, Charlie Dagida along the Ukrainian border.
In. They say there could be even more Russian troops. I mean, what are you able to see and figure out from where you are?
Well, we got here when it was dark already, and the Russian border is just a few hundred yards that way. It still is open to commercial traffic back and forth. Now, what we have seen, we've talked to some of the Ukrainian Border Patrol, and they say their numbers have been beefed up over the last few days. They say some of them are dug in on this side. They won't tell us exactly where. And we also do know that some of the civilian self-defense paramilitary militias have also come up to the border, although in the last few hours they have drawn back somewhat. We don't know where they are right now. But of course the question is as well, if the Russians were to come across to this side of the border, has the Ukrainian military actually got any fight in them? Because we know that the Russians are much more prepared, better equipped as well. And if you look at what happened down in Crimea just the other week, well, there, most of the Ukrainian troops never put up a fight. They didn't get the orders to fight from the defense ministry back in Kiev. And now the defense ministry is saying that the troops that had been based in Crimea, 75% of those actually defected to the Russians. And so if there is a fight in this area, then that fight could fall to these paramilitary self-defense militias. In fact, in western Ukraine yesterday, we were talking to some of them there, some of the nationalist militias, and they do say that unlike Crimea, if the Russians come into Ukraine proper, they will burn the ground under what they call the invaders' feet, Aaron.
So Carl, what you're saying is there could be a war here, but no fight. I mean, Russia could get a huge part of the territory where you're standing.
US moves troops closer to Ukraine. 600 soldiers to be sent to Eastern Europe. The United States is sending a wave of paratroopers to Eastern Europe this week in a move intended to reassure NATO allies following Russia's seizure of Crimea. In response to Russia's incursion into Ukraine, The US plans to deploy some 600 troops already stationed in Europe to Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. The 173rd Infantry Brigade, a US Army airborne unit based in Vicenza, Italy, will deploy 150 soldier companies to each country. By the end of the week, each unit will remain stationed for roughly a month as part of rotational deployments before being replaced by new troops. The US had previously sent F-16 fighter jets to Poland and Romania, as well as F-15s to Lithuania and a contingent of Marines to train in Romania and Latvia. Russia is believed to have massed some 40,000 troops along Ukraine's eastern border. The US currently has about 67,000 troops stationed across Europe. Pentagon Press Secretary spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby, in a briefing with the press on Tuesday, hinted that additional troops could be sent to other NATO allies.
Дежурный офицер спокойно реагирует на сообщения о боевой тревоге. Готовность проверялась уже не раз. Результат, кажется, запрограммирован. Оперативное и четкое выполнение приказа. Перегруппировку войск в режиме реального времени контролирует из Москвы Национальный центр управления обороной.
Боевой пост 323. Доложите о применении самолета военно-транспортной авиации.
Задача военно-транспортной авиации – переброска десантных подразделений с техникой. А чтобы во время реального десантирования все прошло, как говорят военные, штатно, то есть как по маслу, перед посадкой на борт десантники успевают пройти все еще раз на тренажерах. До места лишь экипажи боевых машин добираются с комфортом. Остальные совершают многокилометровый марш-бросок в полной экипировке.
In Moscow, with the blackouts, the fire, and the disappearance of Vladimir Putin for 10 days, he has now resurfaced. He showed up at this meeting as scheduled, kind of laughed off the rumors, but this wasn't before the MSM tried to show some old footage. I covered that on Dabu 777. But he says, you know, no lower back issues, no baby. He's obviously not dead. And apparently, he just simply wanted some time away. Like I'd said in one of the other videos, or potentially sick. And if he was sick, they were never going to show it to the public. So it's still a good possibility. But he said he wanted some time away. And these are some of the official pics here from today, this meeting. Now, other outlets were airing old footage from when he signed that treaty in Crimea, trying to pass that off. Well, saying, oh, he's shown back up while showing that footage. But this is the actual meeting that took place. And what he's done here is he's ordered 40,000 troops in the northern and western part of Russia to be put on full alert Monday as part of this Snap-Readiness exercises. So 40,000 troops in movement up here in this area.
President Vladimir Putin tells Western diplomats that Russia has pulled back its troops from the Ukrainian border. But the White House says there's no evidence that the 40,000 troops Russia has on the border have moved. Putin is also urging insurgents in southeast Ukraine to postpone their referendum Sunday, and at the same time is calling on Ukraine's military to halt all operations against pro-Russia activists. Funeral services were held in the Ukrainian cities of Sloviansk and Odessa for civilians and pro-Russia separatists killed in fierce fighting last week. 4 people were buried in Sloviansk, where Ukrainian government troops launched a campaign to regain control of buildings. In Odessa, dozens of people attended a funeral for a prominent pro-Russia separatist. There's concern in Kiev that Odessa could be the next region to fall after 46 people died on Friday when pro-Russian marchers clashed with security forces. One Ukrainian presidential candidate says it is pointless to negotiate with separatists.
For those people who keeping the machine gun, for those people who killing the people, for those people who are terrorists, we should find out the right language they understand, and that would be the language of force.
And it's the cause of the conflicts that continue to raise concerns.
There should be no doubt that the Russian government is trying to orchestrate conflict and provocations in the east and south of Ukraine, and that the immediate goal is the disruption of elections on the 25th of May.
Trying to reduce tensions, Western nations are increasing their diplomatic efforts ahead of Ukraine's May 25th presidential election.
Here we go. NATO planning now 40,000 troop force bases on the Russian border. 40,000. Okay, we reported earlier about the 4,000 rotational battalions. But now, according to Sputnik News, they're reporting that the military alliance has officially called for permanent bases on Russia's border manned by 4,000 troops and an additional 40,000 rapid deployment force. Now the question they're stating is, how will the United States pay for their latest round of warmongering? Well, apparently they state here on Monday, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg confirmed that NATO will deploy 4 robust international battalions to Poland and the Baltic states to counter fears of Russian aggression. It's happening, folks. The buildup is happening. Our last story has pointed out these are human shields meant to trigger the war should Russia decide to take the first step.
This is a breaking news alert.
More breaking news for you. Unfortunately, we have to report that the Russian army, 40,000 strong, are now mobilizing near the Ukrainian border. NATO is now lashing out against Vladimir Putin, telling him that he needs to back down. On to the news. This story comes to us courtesy of Henry Holloway at the Daily Star. Now, he reports that fears have been raised that war could erupt between Russia and Ukraine at any moment after claims that the superpowers' armies are in now battle formation. Now, wait till you hear what's about to happen. This is what's being reported out of Ukraine. They state that tensions in the region around Crimea are at an all-time high after Vladimir Putin accused his enemies in Kiev of attempting to carry out a terrorist attack in the Russian-occupied region of Crimea. They state here that Russian military equipment has been pictured being shipped to the disputed regions. We've reported on that. Of course, they also state astonishing images of a Moscow military train packed with tanks trundling towards the front. Heavy equipment, tanks headed there. Now, of course, there is reports of heavy fighting between Ukrainian military and Russian separatists. They state has erupted along the border between the Ukraine and Russia near Donetsk. They state that the reports now of heavy shelling and machine gun fire. They also report here that in the occupied region to the west on the Crimean Peninsula, there are reports that Russia has shut down the internet. Russia has shut down the internet for security reasons after reports of the shootout on the border. Now, the article states here that Ukraine has placed its troops onto the highest level now of combat readiness as they are preparing for a threat of a full Russian invasion. Now, there was an emergency meeting, they state here, of the United Nations Security Council. Ukrainian ambassador stated that Russia has 40,000 troops in Crimea with, quote, bad intention. They also state that a spokesman for the Ukrainian security forces has said that Russian troops along the border are currently digging trenches and moving into battle formation. My friends, this is a very, very serious development and escalation that we were not considering. We thought that the tensions were starting to simmer down, but after the alleged terrorist attack, and now this is clear escalation. 40,000 troops are ready to do battle, and of course with the NATO connection in Ukraine, we know that NATO and the United States have been training Ukrainian forces right there. So this could be a hook to bring NATO into a full-blown war with Russia that we have been very concerned about, we've been reporting on. Of course, if you follow what we've been reporting as far as the Baltic escalation, there are now troops moving into formation in the Baltics in anticipation of another battle with Russia on the horizon. So if you think about this, the big picture, you have the Ukrainian war with Russia breaking out. And then, of course, the next escalation would be an attack in the Baltics with the troops there. Now, there's only about 4,000 alleged troops. It's not alleged. There's now 4,000 troops in the Baltics stationed there on a permanent rotationary basis. But that's not enough to fend off a Russian attack against NATO. So you're going to clearly see a reinforcement of NATO troops into the Baltics in anticipation of a potential attack in that region to correspond with the Ukrainian attack. So hopefully this will not escalate to that level, but this is obviously something that we are going to be watching very closely. If you have any information, if you have any links, please put them in the description or in the comments section below.